We start again. Guy, thanks so much for coming on. Like I just said off air, your audio, your Bitcoin Audible, and you going through all of these amazing articles has helped me so much. So I thought I'd reach out. And for anyone who maybe hasn't heard of you, then could you just do an introduction, please?
Yeah. I'm Guy Swann, as I say, the guy who has read more about Bitcoin than anybody else you know, and I'm at the Crypto Economy actually on Twitter. I've been fighting about whether or not I wanted to try to change that handle to just something like Guy Swann since I've rebranded the podcast not too long ago. But the podcast is Bitcoin Audible, and just like Max said, I read. I literally just read. I mean, I do a whole lot of discussion and commentary and stuff afterward as well for pretty much every piece. But basically, there's an ocean of just amazing stuff written down, articles, whole books. I mean, I'm not sure how many whole like books I've done now. I've done 6 on Audible specifically, um, that are for sale. I did Knut's first book, Sovereignty Through Mathematics, on the show. I did 21 Lessons by Gigi on the show. Um, I did 2 of Robert Breedlove's pieces, which are veritable books. I think one of
I'm
them's like,
halfway through your Robert Breedlove, Master and Slaves of Money. It's
God,
really,
it's
really
such a
good.
good one. That was such a
Oh my
good one.
god, it's I'm going to be sending that to so many people now. All the people who sort of uh, they need a little bit more of a backstory and
hmm
look at how go into the history of things. He's absolutely nailed it.
Yeah, and just that framing of like, and the way to actually attempt to calculate what was actually stolen and use it in the context of like these people had their time enslaved, like they were
Hmm.
literally working for someone else without being told. I love that the whole framing of that is just amazing. But his other piece, Money, Bitcoin, and Time, I did in, I think, in 6 different pieces, because I think it was 2 pieces per section. But that thing's a book. I think it was like 3 hours and some change in total. And then what's really driving the cryptocurrency phenomenon, which is like Chris Dannon and the guys from Iterative Capital, which is like an OTC desk, and I think they do like financial services and stuff. But that was a brilliant piece. I think that one came in at 4 or 5 hours too. But it's all about like the history of like open source, and it goes almost back really to the beginning of like open cryptography and stuff, like back into like the 1930s and stuff, where it really kind of like lays the seeds of where changes were diverging that ended up leading to the huge open source movement in the 90s, and then obviously Bitcoin and all of the stuff after.
Yeah, people miss that. I think it's not always obvious that if you say, "Oh, Bitcoin's 11 years old," they don't sort of think what went into it before then, because really this is so much older. The idea of having money that isn't debased is much older than having money that is, and the
hmm
idea of this open source stuff, it goes back a long time. So it's great having these articles to explain that.
Yeah. We're at 420 something. Actually, I think I may have just dropped the 420th uh,
Wow.
read, which is a nightmare to try to keep track of on the back end. I've got 2
I
people
bet.
now working to try to organize and clean it all up so that BitcoinAudible.com is like um, uh, basically just like a library where people can just go and type in whatever article they want to listen to, or that piece by Nick Szabo that they'd never read, which Szabo, I hope to have his entire unenumerated, basically every meaningful piece up there. I want to have an audio, and he gave me free reign to just like, yeah, man, do it all. Um,
Awesome.
I got so many of the pieces from the the Nakamoto Institute. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, just an ocean of stuff. But like I said, it's just so much of it is amazing and has so many great perspectives on all of this: the technology, the history, the cypherpunk culture, and the 30 years of like rich history leading up to finally landing on Bitcoin. Uh, and it's just kind of lost out there, I feel like, like with like nobody has the time to read all that crap. And
They don't.
so that's why I made the show, like everybody has time to put in some headphones while they're driving down the road or doing the dishes or whatever it is. Um, and so I'm trying to make sure everybody gets those pieces because they're just amazing.
I'm so thankful that you have done that. I'm so thankful that you're taking the time to do it because, again, like I said off air, for someone like me, my reading and writing is terrible. It just makes my life so much easier, and the information actually goes in better as well. Like even if I'm reading something and it might take me 2-3 times longer than audio, I will not really retain any of that information very well. Whereas the
Mm-hmm.
audible stuff, like yeah, you can just have it on in the background, and it just seems to, a week later, 2 weeks later, I'll be having a conversation and I'm picking bits from these articles out where I just wouldn't have that with reading. So
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not the only one that this is so useful for.
Well, I'm glad. And the word keeps spreading. Keep getting more and more listeners that are interested in it. So it's awesome. I get excited just to know that there's so many people who get value out of it. Um,
Mm,
but it's funny. Like for reading or whatever, I would say I definitely retain more when I read. But the funny thing about listening is that I'll re-listen to stuff like 3 or 4 times. So because I have so much time available to listen, but I don't have the time to sit down and dedicate to reading outside of the
mm.
podcast, which is now it's like it's basically my job. But
Yeah.
um, I still listen to a ton of stuff. So, and I know a lot of people are in basically that situation, either don't have the time or just can't focus on it, that kind of thing.
Mm. So, what was it that sort of tipped you over the edge then? What was it that made you start reading out loud? And is it something that someone asked you to do, or were you just like, no one else is doing this? Like, this is going to be a useful thing for people?
It was more the second one, but there were actually a bunch of things that lined up when I finally broke down and just started reading, actually doing the show. My brother and I have been longtime Bitcoiners, and we've been fascinated by it for oh god, just forever. We got in right when we first heard about the Silk Road,
Hmm.
just because that was what kind of put Bitcoin into like mainstream attention for the first time ever. And it was, I read the white paper that night. My brother was majoring in economics, and I was a huge tech nerd. I loved BitTorrent and just the idea of how that network worked. And he would come back and we would debate about economics and all this stuff. And we just, as soon as we heard about Bitcoin, it was just like, a, it was the culmination of everything that we were interested in at the time. Um, and so years later, we had been trying to start a podcast forever, like me and him. In fact, we recorded, there are like 10 lost episodes of some random podcast by us, probably like 2 or 3 years before I ever even started Bitcoin Audible, or well, the crypto economy at the time, but Bitcoin Audible now. Um, and I also was, I loved reading to my wife. She would always be like busy, like doing something. And, uh, we would read, yeah, we would just read stuff regularly, like sometimes at night, sometimes just during the day. And I would sit and do all the voices and just read aloud, like stories or books that we wanted to get through.
Mm.
Um, and so I was kind of like doing all of this stuff, and I had been thinking the whole time, I wish somebody would just these, read these articles, make it all available so that I could listen to it, because that's where I consumed most of my content. It still is where I consume most of my content.
Mm.
Um, and one day I was just so sick of having beat around the bush on actually publishing a podcast for 4 years. Um, and I didn't have anything to read to the wife at the moment. So I was kind of in like a lull of wanting to read something.
So
And
you picked up shelling out, and
I
that's where it started.
yep. Uh, and I think my biggest barrier was just being nervous. Like, I was super insecure when I first picked up the microphone and was like, "Oh god, people might listen to me be an idiot or say something stupid." Um, I just finally just, like I was like, "I gotta get over it or it's just never gonna happen." And the first,
Mm.
like, 15 episodes or so, I'm sitting on my bed with, my iPad with the article brought up, and I'm just talking into my iPhone, the little recording, like, notes
Hmm.
app or whatever, and that's how I did the first episodes. And I just went and published, and I didn't even share it out. I didn't even do anything. I was just like, screw it. Like, I'm just gonna do it and see what happens.
It's uh, it's weird when you think back to those times, like when you first sit in front of a microphone and how weird it feels, like how uncomfortable that feels.
Yeah.
It is. I think after a little bit of time, you do just sort of forget about it. You forget it's there, and you're just having conversations. But
Hmm.
yeah, I had a similar feeling. I remember I remember doing like a couple where I'd rather than having any guests on, like I was trying to actually just talk about the things that were interesting me at the time or things that I thought um, people needed to pay attention to and all this stuff. And then I remember listening back and just being just like almost sick. I was just like, oh, that's my voice. Oh my God. No one's going to want to listen to that. And it takes some time just to get to the point where you just don't care anymore. You're like, well,
Yeah.
if someone likes it, then that's great. And if they don't, then they can do one.
It's funny. I didn't start commentary on my episodes for that reason. That was actually one of the things that I think made it a little bit easier for me to start the podcast is
Hmm.
that I was reading someone else's work. So I was
Yeah.
just the voice. And I had started into some commentary, like to just kind of talk about what the article was about or trying to dig a little bit deeper or explain something if they just kind of passed over it, you know? Um, and I remember like some of those early ones, I went on like 20 or 30 minutes worth of recording after it, but was
Mm.
just so uncomfortable about it and so nervous that I would do just like you did. Like I would start listening back to it and I'd be like, what in the hell am I talking about? This is a tangent, like blah, blah, blah. And then I would just delete like 90% of it and I'd cut it down
Yeah.
to like 2.5 minutes and then just be like, all right, done. I'm done. Publish, leave it alone.
Yeah. And so when you first started it, like, it's by the way, like, I really am envious that you had a brother who was into this stuff as well. That must be when you're first getting involved and like you're interested in something. It must be amazing to have someone to talk to because for me, until I found Bitcoin Twitter, I just talked to myself. Like no one would speak. No, literally no one cared. And I just wished so much that I had someone like you did. What was that like in the sort of early days? Were you both on the same page, or because he'd done his economics degree, was he kind of like, yeah, I'm not sure about this, like whether it's gonna work or?
No, we were actually both uh, like as far as like intellectual curiosity, my brother and I are very much on the same page.
Mm,
Um, and we had been he was uh, his economics degree actually led him to Austrian economics, not because they taught Austrian economics, but because he would argue with his professors. And
right.
like they would teach him something and he hates both of us do like when something like when you're given two pieces of a puzzle and they don't fit together, and
Hmm.
he would catch these little contradictions and he would be like, wait a second, if what you said yesterday were true and you applied it universally, literally what we learned today couldn't be true. And then he would come home. We were living together at the time in this crappy little corner of East North Carolina, and barely making our electricity bill. And he would come home and we would just argue about it, like fun argue, not like
Mm.
angry at each other, but he would just be like, how could this possibly be true? And then like we would start digging into it, and we actually went into modern monetary theory at the time, thinking
Oh
that
god.
because it's actually logically more consistent than Keynesianism is, because it doesn't contradict itself. It just believes something that's stupid. Like the
Mm.
axiom is wrong, you know?
It's
Like it just thinks that
consistently stupid.
it's exactly. It's consistent using a wrong foundation.
Yeah.
And so that was much more interesting to us. But then we were running into the exact same problem. In fact, one of the really popular economists in the MMT theory, Warren Mosler, we actually had an ongoing uh, email conversation with him back and forth. Because my brother just emailed him one day, and then we would just sit down and we would write up responses, and we did this for months. And then we were just figuring out that like all of this was still just wrong. There was still just something very, very wrong with all of it. And he stumbled upon, I think it was Hayek. Milton
Mhm.
Friedman and Hayek were the first two that we really started to look at. And then like, you know, the Ron Paul movement was all happening like during that period too. So it was kind of like coming at us from like a bunch of different angles. And then just as we were like, holy crap, this explains so much. And finally, it was logically consistent. It started from very basic, understandable truths about what it means to be better off or worse off, like what wealth was. Um, and and then it was like, and then there was Bitcoin. And at the same time,
Mm.
I'm like a crazy computer nerd. I love like BitTorrent, just technology. I'm just reading about that in my spare time. We're diving into Linux, like so we're in the open source thing, like all of it aligned. And then
Mm.
there's the white paper. That night, we read the white paper and we're just completely lost. We were drunk, uh, absolutely fascinated. We were up until I remember I went to bed and the sun had risen the next day, and we had just gone off all night about Bitcoin, about how like this was a game changer. This was an unbelievable breakthrough in network technology. This was Austrian economics codified into a network. Like it just everything about it would just it was perfect place, perfect time, and we were right on the same page. And we've basically been there ever since. Like my enthusiasm does not seem to dwindle whatsoever.
It's so weird that, isn't it? I would say in everything else in the world that I've ever been involved with, my interest is not normally held, and I start to pick more and more holes in the thing that I think is brilliant at the
Mhm.
beginning. And this is the first time in my life where that hasn't happened. And it's such a weird feeling because I don't know if you ever get this, but do you ever just occasionally catch yourself and just think, am I completely mental? Am I am I so wrong about every single thing in the world that I'm viewing the world through a lens that no one else sees and is wrong? Or are we just like 10, 20 years ahead in terms of where the world's going? Do you ever have those worries, or are you sort of settled now and you're like, no, I'm confident?
um I wouldn't call them worries. They have been worries in the past, but I do it about every other day just as a fun thought exercise.
Mm.
Um, but without a doubt, there have been those moments that I don't think if you're not considering that, I don't think there's any way to think to have ever actually found the truth. And I will regularly seek out something that deeply contradicts my opinion and
Mm.
see if I can, from an objective standpoint, let me just sit down. I mean, that's hard to do, but you know,
Yeah.
as best I can, sit down and actually read this and see, does this worldview make sense? Do their presumptions make sense? And because that is particularly early on. Um, in fact, that's kind of how I really started to dig into the specifics of Bitcoin because my
Mm.
brother and I invested in it at the very, very peak of one of the early bubbles. And
Mm.
we had, like I said, we were barely making like our electricity bills. We had no money to like we were as broke gets. And but we took what little savings we had, which were, you know, a family gift from a grandparent, and it was not much. And we uh, bought Bitcoin at the very peak, thinking this was it. This is going to change the world, and then just blood for the next 6 months, nothing but down. And so, like, here's my first foray into investing, and I'm all excited about this new technology. And I'm over here literally vomiting in the bathroom, like, because I'm losing everything that I had yesterday. Like, and I think it was like a 93% loss at one point. Like, just, it was basically like we had turned what was a significant amount of money to us at the time into nothing, basically,
Yeah.
like something that
You
would
turn
barely
wine
cover,
back into water.
yeah, the water bill, like, um, and and that was when I was like, okay, if I got in on like a vague understanding of this thing, and it was just a dream, you know, it was just like, oh, here's this thing that's going to bring down the state and it's going to be independent, global, decentralized money, blah blah blah. But I didn't know anything about it really. I've read the white paper, like that's not an in-depth analysis, you know.
Mm.
Um, and so and I had a lot of motivation because I was incredibly stressed, and I decided that I wasn't going to get out unless I proved to myself that I could kill it. That there was clearly some sort of vulnerability, or that there was something in the economics of it that wouldn't work, blah blah blah. Like, I was going to try to figure out if I could poke a hole in it logically.
Mm.
And I just started, at the time I didn't have anything else to do really, so I just like went hard and was just reading and consuming everything I could get my hands on about Bitcoin to see if I had just made the biggest mistake of my life, and was a complete moron. Like you said, I'm just living in my own little corner of my insane world, and everybody else knows something that I don't. Um, or if the opposite was true, that I just landed on a great opportunity and just happened to be learning and interested in the things that, you know, like pointed me in this direction, and that there is
Mm.
something real behind this. And again, I just started learning and reading and never got anywhere, but being more, having stronger conviction. Like, that was the only thing that happened consistently. Now I still have those thoughts, but for the length of time, like we've, this was in, this was 9 years ago now. So, like, the length of time that I've had people, I mean, imagine trying to tell somebody about Bitcoin back then. Like, you were an idiot. I got so many looks of just like, you pathetic fool. Like, oh my God, where do you, like, you're selling me a Ponzi scheme, like, sort of
Yeah.
thing. Like, I've had so many people call me stupid, say, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. When are you going to sell all that garbage that you just, you know, like, just over and
Yeah.
over and over again. So now it's just kind of like part of the game. It's just kind of in the background now. It's like, okay, well,
Hardened to it.
yeah, I kind of expect that. I've been through three minor death spiral periods where everybody was like, it's all gonna die because of the halving, and I'm like, no, no, it's not. It didn't the last two times. It's not going to this time.
Have you noticed that's changed, from say 9 years ago to now? Are the conversations that you're having with people who aren't involved in Bitcoin much different than they were?
Oh yeah. Yeah, night and day, night and day.
Oh,
In
really?
fact, like, I'll still get people who are like, "What?" You know, like they're reluctant or whatever, and particularly in like the finance space, if I, like, reach out to somebody like who's got a finance podcast or is a
Hmm.
CFA, like that sort of thing, they have quite a bit of disdain for it, and it kind of brings it. It kind of throws me back into the 2012 days of like, oh yeah, it's been a while. It's kind of like a little bit of nostalgia for like, I don't care about Bitcoin. I don't know why you would do anything. I don't invest in Ponzi schemes. You know, like that's the sort of response I've gotten a couple of times. But everybody
Yeah.
like in my life, like in normal people and like just kind of the general public, it is not at all. Like, people are interested. People are curious. They don't think it's much, but they know it's not
Hmm.
nothing. And that is literally night and day from the way it was when I was first trying to tell somebody about it.
Yeah, I can only imagine back then because it is now. It's rare to come across someone who hasn't heard of it. Like at least that,
Mhm.
like almost everyone. If you say Bitcoin, like they might have an opinion about it that's wrong, but they've heard of it, and I
Yeah.
think that's almost that's the biggest hurdle. Really, is just it's in everyone's subconscious now, whether they understand it or not, and that's a big thing.
Yeah.
And when you're saying about all these finance guys, do you think that's because they don't want to understand it because they have, I don't want to say wasted, but kind of potentially wasted a lot of time learning about things that maybe aren't going to be relevant and that maybe don't actually make much sense, but that's only because it's the very foundation of what they've learned that's wrong, and everything that they've learned above that actually is useful and has made sense to them. And to believe that everything you've done is wrong must not be a very nice feeling. Do you think that plays into it?
I think I think there is a hint of resentment in that kind of way. But I think it's more of uh, there is definitely an element of realizing that, and I think it's mostly subconscious, but a form of subconscious admission that they have to admit that they don't know a lot of what they think they know if
Yeah.
Bitcoin works, you know? Like it's just
Mhm.
like when you have like a framing of the world or a framing like something that you think is true about the world and something is working or going against that and not failing, like that's really hard to come to terms with. What we naturally do as humans is to just kind of stick it off in a corner and kind of live with the contradiction, and we react by emotionally getting angry because we want to protect that identity that we have of ourselves and that worldview. It's kind of
Mm.
like a form of self-preservation. Like I can't hold a contradiction in my head, so I have to ignore it or just not talk about it. Like just don't bring it up. I'm angry, sort of thing. And I think there is an element of that, and uh, it's also a little bit of fear. I think in the
Mm.
conversations that I have, because it people think Bitcoin is such a. In fact, I just had a tweet about this. Actually, I think you just did something with it.
Was this Eric Townsend one?
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. The one where I'm
Don't
just
know the guy, but what an arrogant thing to say. That
that's
just
pretty
what an
common.
arrogant and pathetic. If that was my friend or like one of my family members said that, I'd give him a slap and say, "Come on, pull your neck in, mate."
But Bitcoin is really multifaceted. Like his response was really arrogant, but I don't hold his position against him, to be honest. Like because it's such a he's like a financial guy. He thinks he knows finance, and he thinks knowing finance means he knows what Bitcoin is or why it's important. I think there's a bigger barrier to people who are really informed in one specific area, and then they think Bitcoin is part of that area, and then it doesn't fit into it. So they're like, obviously it doesn't work. Like, I think his being intelligent and informed, educated on finance is actually his biggest barrier to understanding Bitcoin because he just thinks Bitcoin is finance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's such a good point because there are so many different aspects that you have to understand, and sort of you have to you have to be able to admit yourself that you're not as smart as you thought you were, and that's something that I definitely went through, like trying to learn about this stuff. I went through a long time just being like, wow, I really fucking was wrong about almost everything. Like you have to be able to admit that you're not that smart. And some of these guys always feel like they're the smartest guy in the room, and they sort of maybe that is part of their identity that they have to know, and like you say, it's one tiny part of it, and there's so much more that goes into Bitcoin.
Yeah. And if you look at it from strictly like a financial perspective, I mean, think about what you're going to see. Like a payment service, you'll compare it to that, or maybe like a profit and loss, like investment strategy sort of thing. Those don't make any sense in the context of Bitcoin. Bitcoin isn't a global retail payment service. Like Like, that's not what makes it interesting. Like, you can do that with, like, higher layer protocols and, like, Lightning and stuff, but that's not its model. That's not the innovation that is absolutely revolutionary. It's in establishing a monetary policy where you don't have to trust anybody. It's not managed, it just is. Like,
Mm,
that is the real breakthrough of Bitcoin. But from a finance perspective, this is somebody who's probably highly revered in his social circles, like everybody's like, you're the finance guy. Imagine
mm,
like having to admit that you're wrong or don't know about Bitcoin, or that your assessment that you wrote a whole book about is garbage,
mm.
when everybody thinks of you as the guy who's always got it right. And every time Bitcoin goes up a little bit, it's it's again just kind of slapping you in the face. It's like that splinter that will not come out of your hand, um, and you just want to ignore, because it's very, very humbling. So many times, even times that I thought I understood something about Bitcoin, or I thought I knew something about Lightning or whatever it is, I constantly have to readjust and realize that I only vaguely knew this thing, or I couldn't completely explain it to somebody. I was like, crap, I really thought I knew this. Or like there's some
Mm,
other trade-off that I hadn't considered. Like, it's like trying to say you understand or know the internet. Like, it's just going to keep expanding and getting more complex and more layers. There's never really an end game here.
mm.
Um, and it is very, very humbling. Like, you have to be able to go in going, okay, I could be wrong. Where would I be wrong? I've had to do that over and over and over again.
Mm.
I'm sure there are old things that I've said on this podcast, even after I've already dug into Bitcoin for years and years, that's just completely backwards. And a year later, I didn't figure it out for a year later, reading some other piece, and something clicked. So that's a really important piece that a lot of people have a hard time with, I feel like.
Yeah, and like you say, because things change so quickly, you do kind of adapt with it. And I'm definitely sure the same with me. Like things I've said on this podcast, things I've said in the past, just in conversation and trying to explain this stuff, especially in the early days, like especially when I was really excited. Those first few months where like it's really starting to click and you can't sleep and all you're doing is reading and like watching Andreas Antonopoulos videos and sort of being like, "Oh my god, fuck, this is going to change everything!" And like running around telling everyone, and everyone's just like, "Yeah, fuck off, don't want to hear it, go away, I don't care, it's not interesting." That time where you're putting all these pieces together from the economy side and the computer science side and cryptography and all the things you've listed there, you just sort of you can't quite put them all together, and then finally it clicks, and I feel like like you said, it's never ever going to end. And that's kind of what's so exciting, is that every day in this space you're going in and learning something new, and
Yeah.
I don't really know of any other industries like that.
Yeah, I don't know anything that's I would not be able to come up with anything that is as multidisciplinary as Bitcoin, to like understand it in its full sense. And it's funny to try to think like look at certain perspectives and see where people get it wrong. Like the crypto community, um, the quote unquote crypto and like altcoins
Yeah.
get it. I think probably the biggest barrier there is just understanding what money is, like what the role of money in history is. And if you start talking about like in the 1800s, they're like, that doesn't matter. Like they're not even interested in it. And I'm like, you're not going to get it then. Like you're not
Yeah.
going to understand the fundamental. Like if you go back 3,000 years and start at the origins of money and the iterations that we've had through like the centuries, you realize just how powerful of a breakthrough one of the fundamental pieces of Bitcoin is.
Mm,
Just the idea of a perfectly scarce monetary policy is a breakthrough in and of itself. And then to do that in the digital space is a computer science breakthrough
mm,
of incredible magnitude. Like you're taught, like in computer science, you get taught the Byzantine general's problem, or well, used to, as an impossible problem. Like it's a
mm,
theoretical thing that just, yeah, we'll never solve this. And then Bitcoin did it on top of having the most secure money. Just it just on top of each other, on and on. And the game theory aspects of it, I've learned more about game theory since Bitcoin as I probably couldn't even have really properly defined the term before
Mm,
Bitcoin. And it's been one of the most fascinating things to learn about. Um, but I just don't know anything else like that that just is that deep on so many different levels.
mm. So, I mean, after reading everything that you've read and being involved for such a long time, I know we're never going to know, but if you had to just guess, do you think that Bitcoin was created by one person who is like just a savant, a genius, like crazy, crazy smart one person? Or do you think it's just because there is so much that goes into this? Do you think that it's more likely to be like a group that have worked together over a long time with a sort of goal in mind? Do you have any sort of idea of what you would have to guess?
I would definitely, um, well, not definitely. Um, I think with a lot of the things that I've read, the Satoshi pseudonym was one person.
Hmm.
Whether or not one person worked on the code is a different story. I could see them reaching out to one or two trusted parties and looking for input on it. But what's funny is a lot of even some of the more profound aspects of Bitcoin were actually just a demonstration of not quite knowing what to do and just being incredibly conservative. Like Satoshi wasn't like the most brilliant programmer in the world. He was better at the engineering and like the architecture, like the system itself. In fact, there was a ton of the first iterations just for years was just cleanup, just cleaning up the code, writing it a little bit more succinctly, getting a easier way to do it that was less ambiguous, that sort of thing. And then some of the things that he talked about, like with like the money issuance and stuff, it was just like it was talked about in a way that was like I don't see an easy way to distribute it any other way. Like, and I don't know, it was almost like I don't really know how to do this fairly. So the only way I think that makes sense is to just have this programmatic thing that just runs out eventually. And like it just seemed like one of those things where when anything got subjective and Satoshi felt like he was having to do his own judgment or just guess as to what might be the best, he just went with the absolute simplest option. And I think that's actually in a lot of the beauty of Bitcoin is that where he didn't quite have the answer, he just went simple and it turned out to be the best answer you could have
Mm,
made, you know? And he seemed like that. Like, it's just like when the opcodes, when he found one bug in one opcode, he disabled, what was it, 15, I think? Like it just immediately just deleted them from the client. It's like, okay, well, we don't really need any of this
mm,
crap to make the money work. We need to get what makes the money work. He instituted the block size limit. Oh crap. I just realized there's this huge spam problem. Somebody could DDoS the whole network. Let's just put in a 1 megabyte cap. Like it was just, again, it was like over and over again. It was just these, let's just narrow this down to the absolute core of what it needs to be from as many different angles. I think he was just kind of like a renaissance man, just knew a little bit about a lot and could see this system that could exist with all this crap that he'd been reading on the cypherpunk mailing list. Like here's Hashcash. It's like, damn, you could really use that for something. Here's B Money. What a great proposal. There's some really interesting pieces here. There's BitGold from Nick Szabo. That's an interesting element to how to do the database. Shit, you could put all this
mm.
together. Like I really think that's kind of what happened.
Like you were saying before, someone who's in finance can't really understand this, and someone who's just involved in cryptography maybe doesn't understand it, but maybe this guy, like you say, just knew enough about enough of them and was conservative enough and smart enough that it kind of like maybe that's why it makes sense to like I've said before, if you have to explain to a child like the current financial system or Bitcoin, I can't ever see that a child who is ever going to go, oh yeah, I'll use the other one. Like Bitcoin sounds rubbish. Like they're always going to go with Bitcoin because that's the obvious. It's obviously better. If you just forget what you think you know, it's obviously better and simpler.
Yeah. The key point to that exact position is just that, like, most people don't even realize that they can't explain our current financial system. Like, because it's one of those things that, a fish doesn't think they need to figure out what water is. Like, they're in the water, like from start to finish. So we accept the current financial system and banking system as the one that works because it's the one that is. But I don't think anybody, even people that I've explained it to and have some vague idea and that we've talked about it before, couldn't give me a really good explanation of how the financial system works. I really just don't think like 99.5% of people can do that. So really, it's kind of a question of, you can explain Bitcoin, but you can't really explain the financial system. So when a kid asks, you have to finally come to terms with that. It's like, well, finance works with banks,
Yeah.
and you put your money in a bank, and like, there's always a why that somebody can't answer there.
Yeah, it's so confusing. Maybe it's my conspiracy theory side of me, but I often think they've just made it this confusing on purpose because then no one has time to dig into this and understand it and be like, fucking hell, this is just a
Yeah.
massive Ponzi scheme. Like that's what it is. And it's so funny that when, like you were saying earlier, especially in the early days, and I still get it now, where I've told like people who are incredibly close to me, people who but practically family, and I've said like, seriously, you're getting on a bit now. You're looking at retiring. It'd be worth you having a very small allocation to Bitcoin because of X, Y, and Z. And I will often get, well, it's I've been told it's a pyramid scheme. And what's so amazing is that what they actually are living in is the pyramid scheme, and
Is
they
a
can't
pyramid
see Bitcoin.
scheme.
It's so weird.
It's straight up though. Like, it is. It, like, our financial system, like when you actually get back to the Fed, it's actually a really good example of one.
Mm,
Like, it's actually really thoroughly like a pyramid scheme. You know what I mean? Like, it's not
yeah.
even like kind of. It's not even as if it's like one. It really just kind of is.
It's the perfect one. It's the perfectly made pyramid scheme. You couldn't make a better one, and no one knows. No one knows.
Yeah, no one realizes, and it's it's unfortunate. Like, what I try to do, I've found, like, in talking with people that kind of have that reaction to it or whatever, um, is the best thing I can do is stay confident in my position,
Mm,
because I feel like most people, to get to entertain an idea, they're much more concerned with the confidence of the people they hear the information from
mm,
prior to actually doing any investigating themselves. So I usually, and I got really good at that in the early days, when people just looked at me like I was an idiot, or they was like, this is a scam, like,
yeah.
no, it's just a pyramid scheme or Ponzi scheme, whatever. And I would just say, I totally get, like, from the outside, it really does look like that. And I'll even just kind of like hammer that sometimes to be like, oh no, I totally get why that makes
Mm,
perfect sense. It makes perfect sense that you would see that to begin with. In fact, most people do, but I promise that it's not. If you ever have any questions about it, I'm free to explain it. It's a bit of a rabbit hole, but you know, do as you wish. And I would never recommend that you invest in it without knowing it. Without,
yeah.
like, when you still think that it could be a pyramid or a Ponzi scheme, don't put your money in that if that's what you think.
Mm,
But if you have the time and you ever get interested, hit me up, because I promise you it's not.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely a better way of doing it, and it's certainly not the way that I started doing things, especially when I was like overly excited about it, because it just got,
Same.
because like, how frustrating is it? Because when you truly believe it, like, oh my god, it's going to change the world, this is amazing, and then everyone's just like, yeah, it's a scam, and it's so frustrating, and but it's after a while, and what you're doing is, I think, just the best thing. And I almost now I'll actually just say, yeah, don't buy it. If you don't understand it, don't buy it. Like that actually makes people want it more. If I'm like, it's not for you. They're like, why? Like, you wouldn't understand it. Like it's pretty complex.
Yeah. And that's a show that what that is though is that you're showing that you're confident that you don't need them to buy it, like which is usually something like if you're in like a multi-level marketing scheme or a Ponzi scheme or something, they're desperate. You've got to buy this. I'm invested in this, and if you don't buy it, it's going to die or something. And I just
Yeah.
don't have that. Like my conviction in Bitcoin is I'm not worried. I'm not worried if the people around me believe in it or are going to buy it, because I genuinely think it's inevitability when we have, unless something amazing comes along in comparison to the legacy system. The legacy system is blatantly and painfully unsustainable, and Bitcoin is painfully sustainable. Like
Yeah.
Bitcoin's going to keep working, and I'm not going anywhere. So do what you will.
Exactly. And the other point with that is, when people say, "Oh yeah, it's a scheme," and "Oh, you're wanting me to buy it," and I've had actually people say that to me, like in the early days, probably because of how excited I was again. But and like now I think back and I'm thinking, do you really think that you buying like a few £100, or even whatever they buy is going to make any difference to my investment on something that has a market cap of like $140 billion? Do you really think, like, unless you're Warren Buffett or like, I don't know that you've got like a cheeky 30, 40, 50 billion shoved under the mattress, it makes no fucking difference at all. Don't care.
I'm not selling you mine. I'm just
Yeah.
saying you should buy some. No, you can't have mine unless you're paying $100,000 a coin.
Exactly. Yeah, it's
That's
and
hilarious.
like you say, that confidence comes at a point as well. Like, it's kind of like a dick move, and people will probably hate me later on, but I do get to the point with people where I'm just like, you know what? If you're going to treat me like an idiot, or you're going to just like scoff at things and not really be bothered, you don't really deserve this. Like, you don't. A lot of
Yeah.
people are putting a lot of time and energy into learning about it and building it and being involved with it. And I've kind of got to the stage where I'm like, I'd rather that the people who are involved, who are actually making this thing better and going to be worth more in the future because of the things that they're doing, I'd rather them have it. Like, I don't want someone who doesn't really care and sort of slags it off. I'm just like, nah, don't bother. Keep your feet out.
Yeah. Yeah. There's like that's been like that's the way I feel most of the time about it. Like particularly when someone treats me particularly like just like you dummy
Yeah.
kind of attitude. I have a very intelligent uh uh, uh family member, I guess you could say, not a close family member, but who has basically treated me like that for a long
Mm,
time, and for good meaning, like not trying to like be really demeaning, but was really demeaning,
mm.
and just pretty arrogant. And I know that's the way. Like I feel like I want to do that so bad, but at some point, I know at some point I'm like, okay, like I know what it's like to stand where you are and think that the person I'm talking to is investing in something incredibly stupid.
Yeah.
Like I know, I mean, I still have that. I mean, I'm not demeaning or snotty to anybody. So they're responsible for that. But like
Mm,
I'll see people like investing in, thinking that the stock market is a safe place to put money, or
mm.
that bonds are good, like negative interest, like not seeing
The bigger picture.
the huge cracks in all of the financial system. So I see people making decisions that I would never touch for a million years.
Mm.
And so like I know that feeling of standing where they are, and I do hate, it just makes me feel disgusted to think that that's the way that person sees me
Mm.
when we're having that conversation. But then at some point I just have to be at peace with it.
Yeah.
And I think it just became so common in the early days that I just was like, it's okay. Like time is going to make this. It's going to either prove me like I've been humbled by Bitcoin. Like, Bitcoin has slapped me a couple of times in my history and punched me in the gut really hard. And so, like, I like at some point you just got to get past it all and
Yeah.
just be okay with the way they think about it.
Yeah.
And if it works, I'll be right. And I'll be thinking, I'll be thinking day in and day out, I freaking told you so. But I won't say it out loud. I
Well,
won't.
what you can say is just when they come to you at 100,000 a coin, you can say, "Okay, I knew this day would come. So what I've done is I've made 420 episodes on my podcast explaining to you why you should have bought this when I first told you and why you still should. Here's the link." That's like such
Exactly.
an easy way to just be smug without being smug and still help them.
Here, man, it's now still a good time to get in. There's never a bad time. It's the future. It's like saying, "Oh, I can't invest in the internet. It's 2002, and oh, the bubble already passed." It's like, no, it's going to be the new infrastructure. So,
Mm.
figure it out. Like, there's plenty to learn.
So what do you see like, you know, in the future and without going like too crazy forward, um, if you say like in the next 5 years, let's say, where do you see this space? Like, it's obviously early days, but there is a core group of people, certainly on Bitcoin Twitter, and I'm sure others lurking in the Telegram groups and everywhere else that are like absolutely obsessed with this stuff and like believe, like we're having this conversation, that this is the future and that all these amazing things can be built with it and on top of it. And what do you think is happening in 5 years?
I think it might be in less than 5 years. Like
Mm,
in 5 years' time, we may see a real push in the infrastructure inversion. Like, I think Bitcoin is going to be kind of a combination, like as an allegory to the internet. It's going to be the TCP/IP and the Linux of the internet. Most people don't know that Linux is like 80% of the internet
mm,
because they have a Windows computer or a Mac.
yeah.
Like people don't think about it uh, as a front-facing operating system, but they don't realize that the servers they're connecting to are running a version of Linux. And many of the OSs that they use, Android, is built from Linux. Mac is Unix. Like the core of the internet is Linux. And then in that same way, TCP/IP isn't something that people like directly interact with, but all of their services and their apps and everything speak that language. That is the language of the internet. And what we saw before were all of these closed off, isolated networks, these intranets, a huge top-down AT&T phone network, like all communication networks were owned, like they were centralized and they were permissioned. You had to be a subscriber. You had to be like you couldn't innovate on the AT&T network. Like you couldn't offer voicemail service to your friend down the street. Like AT&T owned the services on the phone network.
Mm,
So if you wanted to try out voicemail, you couldn't do it to two customers. You had to do it nationwide or not at all. Like you just had to make $1 billion investment in some new feature on that network.
like huge
And
barrier to entry.
huge barrier to entry. And then obviously nobody in their homes can provide a service backwards through the phone. You can't do anything with your phone. It's not you can't host from their phone network. And then one day, just the internet started to build up and these connections started to get made, and people started to use modems, and this word processing device showed up in people's homes. Like they had computers, and everybody was fascinated that you could just type a thing up. Word processing used to be a giant business, like it's an industry of people who
Mm,
typed things literally, and then it just disappeared. Like now everybody just types. Um, and And then at some point, the thing just flipped. AT&T's phone network was no longer an analog network. It was analog at the last mile. Your grandma still picked up her corded phone in the kitchen, but it went to a hub that turned it into TCP/IP packets and then sent it across the country and turned it back into analog phone at the other end. At some point, the incredible efficiency gain and openness of the internet, of that open protocol for any type of communication, not just one type of communication, all communication, was so unbelievably better than the analog centralized alternatives that there was just this tipping point where you weren't communicating if you weren't on it. And there was just an explosion. Like, everybody now connected at any edge of the network was a service provider if they wanted to be. Could make a website for 3 people who were interested in their website, could host a podcast that's just for Bitcoiners who happen to want to listen to articles. Like, that was never possible before in the age of closed off, owned, like, permissioned networks. And that is exactly what we have in finance today. We have closed, permissioned intranets everywhere. Zelle can't send money to PayPal. PayPal can't send money to Cash App. They all have to go back to the banking system and then settle to the Fedwire system. Like, they're all layers on top of each other, and all the stuff at the edges is completely disconnected. They're all isolated networks. But with Square and with Strike, I think we are seeing the beginnings. They're going to be able to talk to each other. Square, Jack says publicly on Twitter that it's not a question of if, it's a question of when they make settlements in Bitcoin and Lightning available. They're going to do it.
So do you think that there's going to be an infrastructure inversion like there was with the phone companies sort of treating the internet like it was nothing, and then everything being, everything's on the internet, everything goes through, like you're saying, TCP/IP or like Skype and all that sort of stuff, that flips? That's what we're going to see with finance, and that almost these kind of, you might still have banks of some sort for a while, or you might still have some of these services, but actually they will be routing payments through Lightning or some other second or third layer or something, and everything will be built off the top of Bitcoin, basically.
Yes, that is what I think. And we, for a long time, the average consumer will just realize, they'll just be like, okay, all of my apps got a whole lot easier. I don't know why. Payments go through faster now. Fees are a little bit less. They just work. And they send $20 from Zelle to PayPal and then to Cash App, and it's just $20 through the whole trip. They never know that they're using Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is settling those payments because the cost and the time and the risk, actually, of trying to make that settlement through the banking system is orders of magnitude higher. I mean, just with a normal credit card payment, you're looking at 2%, 3%. Like, huge, plus like 15 cent per transaction. Like, the ability to use that infrastructure is just, it will literally change everything. And I think we will use dollars for many, many years without realizing that the only reason we can send it from point A to point B is because there's Bitcoin moving in the back end.
Yeah, it's crazy to think how much change there will be, but it is kind of the logical progression, and like you say, just it's so much more efficient, and it's final. The settlement. People often say to me like, "Oh yeah, well I can send a bank transfer in the UK and it comes through in minutes." I'm like, "Yeah, but it doesn't actually. It's just an IOU through someone, through someone, through someone. It's not, you're not actually getting that value."
Yeah,
that's the difference, and it can make things like, I kind of have this vision of there being a world where like you were talking about before, the fact that you've been able to start your podcast and I've been able to start mine, and there's pretty much no barrier to entry. I'm kind of hoping that kind of rolls out where, we had all these problems with Twitter, and we kind of still have all these problems with social media and not really owning your own content and stuff. I'm kind of hoping that the dreams that people are pushing of everyone owning their own data, and maybe something being done with Lightning or with Bitcoin and with the stuff that Microsoft are doing. What's your thoughts on all of that? Do you think that sort of stuff can be built on it as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt. That was one of the first things that I was like really getting excited about, like some sort of potential for that kind of a thing. And I think again, we're seeing if you look at it, it's the same story so many times. I think the fight between decentralization and centralization happens on many different layers and multiple time scales. And it kind of moves in a 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing. That we make these big leaps into this whole other network, and then even though we have something as decentralized and broad and as difficult to shut down as the internet, we still find ourselves now congregating around all these central servers that hold all this data, these centralized, closed off networks. Like, I can't make a Twitter post that sends to somebody on YouTube. You know what I mean? Like, again, we're in this situation where we have these closed networks, and the network owners are the ones that decide what we can do. And there's not this open standard protocol. But I think it's just kind of the stages of development of figuring these problems out, that the centralized solution is just the easier one. So that's the first stage of the next thing. And then inevitably the centralized solutions become unsustainable. They get bloated, they get technical debt, they get, financial and authoritative debt, like where same things that happens with huge governments. The bigger they get, the suckier they are. And then eventually they fall, they just collapse under their own corruption and inability to do anything but walk forward and get bigger. And then we start back from scratch. We kind of like move this whole process over again, but that we're making progressive steps towards increasing decentralization. And I think it's pretty clear that the social media behemoths is one of those places where we're overdue for built up pressure to make a change. And I think that will absolutely be part of, I think Bitcoin and Lightning will be critical to actually finding a decentralized way to fund, and like capitalization of that sort of thing is the problem. And now we have a new money, a permissionless money that anybody can tinker with, that makes that possible. I find it inevitable that there is a solution to that, period. Don't know how long it takes, but I think it's there.
Yeah, it's that sort of that dream of just having the ability to own all your own data, have control of it completely, that you can't be censored, that your money can't be censored, your speech can't be censored. If you want to try an idea, you can do it. If someone wants to invest in that, they can invest in it. And I just feel like so much of what happens in today's world is just blocking brilliant ideas because of monopolies and all this regulation and all this stuff that is supposedly there to protect people, but it just feels like it's slowing everybody down, and just it drains the passion out of people. So if we can get to that stage where all of this stuff is like usable to most people, I just think that the things that can be built are going to just blow our minds, and it's so exciting. That's what keeps me so interested. Like, the investment side of it is cool, and like, I genuinely believe it's the best investment on the planet. I can't think of something else that I look at and is even close, but I know that that's a long way off. But
Yeah.
this stuff is like, if it works, the world's going to be like a place that I'm excited to live in. Not like a lot of the time. I don't know what you find in the States, but here I just find it so frustrating. Just I feel it is very claustrophobic.
Yeah.
It's not built for people who think outside the box or just want to try stuff. Everything's so slow moving; it is frustrating.
Yeah, it's like the legacy system is just being drugged through molasses.
Yeah.
Like everything is just like a grueling trudge. And uh I totally agree. And I think so much of it is like bogged down by uh, I mean a whole slew of things, but like they all feed on each other. They're all like a feedback loop of like a bad foundation to the whole system. But it's like excessive bureaucracy, the bad money that causes unbelievable debts. It creates consumerism, and destroys just the very idea. It doesn't. I mean, think about what a collapse in the monetary system would do. Like
Mm-hmm.
when prices are trying to correct, what they do is it specifically rewards the people who are frugal and are responsible and don't have a lot of debt, but instead had lots of savings.
Mm.
And they have been the ones that have paid for the last three collapses,
Yeah.
because all the people who went into debt got bailed out.
Yeah.
So everybody who would have changed what they did now just got reinforced that they should continue to do the irresponsible thing. They should continue to do the corrupt thing. They should continue to over leverage, because last time I was the one that got paid and the guy who saved was the idiot.
Definitely.
And it just destroys society.
Yeah, and even the people who have invested in assets. I was in property business before this, and a lot of what I did really was actually quite irresponsible. Like I took massive amount of lending and took on risk, and it paid very well because all these assets just go up in value because the more inflation we have, the more people profit. And the if I'd have taken the advice from my grandparents, I'd have done terribly. It would not have been good. And I've just been going through this book, The Fourth Turning, William Strauss, which kind of, I don't know if you've read it, but it kind of hints at why these cycles happen and this sort of incentive structure.
I haven't read that one specifically. Let me write that down. The Fourth Turning. I'm actually going through something called The Third Wave by Adam Toffler right
Oh, okay.
now. Uh, and so this sounds exactly like something I know the name.
It basically predicts. It was written a long time ago. It was like early '90s, I think it was written, and it's basically made these predictions that pretty much are all coming true. And they're talking about
Nice.
how where we will be around this time, and sort of it says between 2000 and I think it's 15 and 2025, and that is the winter. That is where things go really really bad. And the last time it happened is like world wars and things like that, because
Wow.
things you have like basically it talks about like a spring, summer, autumn, winter, and you have these cycles which each generation is sort of involved in. And that they sort of make this prediction that we are at this time now where things can't continue as they are, and things are going to burn down. And
Yeah.
it kind of it makes me pretty excited that we've got Bitcoin, because otherwise I'm reading through this and I'm like, oh my god, we are screwed. Like things are so bad. I'm really scared. And then I think, oh no, we've got Bitcoin. Like I think that's going to help quite a lot.
No, I truly think it's a game changer in that entire, like specifically in that sphere of problem. Like that is what it's
Mm,
built for, you know? Like that is where Bitcoin shines and provides the most value. When trust breaks down, when you don't know if your government's going to be there tomorrow, when you don't know if your bank or any businesses are going to be there tomorrow, like when you have no idea if you're going to be allowed to leave the country, or which area is going to have political unrest and which doesn't. Like
mm-hmm,
that is where Bitcoin, it's so clear
mm.
that Bitcoin is the most valuable asset you could hold on
Yeah.
to. Um, and I totally agree, though, that like it gives you kind of a sense of peace that like it's so easy to look at the world and be like, everything's gone to hell. There is no future to look forward to. And then when you really dig in and learn like what Bitcoin is about and what it could make possible, you're like, nah, I think we'll be all
Yeah.
right. I think we'll be all right. It's going to be messy. It's going to hurt. And it's not going to be fun, but we're going to be all right. And it makes me feel good. It gives me that warm and cozy feeling when I go to sleep.
Yeah, which is nice because yeah, it's easy to get depressed about all this other stuff. Otherwise, it's especially with all this stuff that's going on with COVID and all this, everyone in England's gone absolutely mental, and and it's the idea, like you were saying before, you don't know if your government's still going to be there in the morning. Well, fucking wish they wouldn't, but they are, and you don't know if you don't know if you're going to have a job. You don't, and you don't know if
Oh
you can
yeah.
even go and open your business because you're told by the people who are running a Ponzi scheme, oh, not only are we going to steal your money like sneakily, but also I know you've worked really hard to start this business, but nah, you're not going to be running it. Tough shit.
Yeah.
And like the fact that they have that power is,
Crazy.
and people
Crazy.
love it here. People love it. I get texts all the time from people going like, "Oh my god, it's amazing! The NHS are doing this like tracking app, and they're going to be able to track us and tell us who we've been around, and oh, it's so brilliant! And it's for the safety. I can't believe they're talking about easing the lockdowns." And you're like, "Are you mental?"
It's a complete disconnect. Complete disconnect. Um, it's because it's. I think if everybody was actually paying the price for it, it wouldn't be the case. But
Yeah.
like particularly here, we've got unemployment. We've got just subsidized out the wazoo. We're burning the currency as fast as we can to
Mm.
try to keep things afloat. And what's happening is they're subsidizing everybody not wanting to go back to work. Like there's I read an article just the other day of people like interviewing. They're worried about going back to work in the sense that they just don't want to work and they're getting paid more to stay home. It's
Yeah.
like you realize that is impossible to sustain. Like
Mm.
nobody has any idea what this actually costs. And that's why
Mm.
everybody thinks it's great. Like I support it,
It's free
sure.
money, right?
It doesn't cost me anything. Yeah, of course it doesn't. Let's shut down the economy for 6 months. Doesn't cost a dime. You should be asking
Yeah.
where that cost is because it costs hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars to do this.
Mm.
And it's going to hurt. Like we have to pay for it. It's going
It
to be
doesn't
messy.
hurt Bitcoin though, and that's
It doesn't. It doesn't. This is good for Bitcoin.
yeah. Money printer go burr is good for Bitcoin. It's great for Bitcoin, and I actually think that it's starting to help people wake up a little bit because that is quite an easy or relatively easy conversation to have. Like when someone goes, "Oh yeah, it's good. There's more funding for this," and it'd be like, if you just literally be like, "Oh, where does that money come from?" "Oh, well, it's there to protect the people," and it's like, "Yeah, but where does it come from? Like, it's not from behind the sofa. Like Boris Johnson hasn't just reached into his pocket and just like pulled it out. Where does it come from?" And when you go down that route, and if someone is actually prepared to ask themselves the question, it doesn't take too long for them to go, "Oh, okay, like that's not great.
Yeah.
Maybe it would be better if I had something that has a fixed supply." It's actually I feel it's actually very helpful to explain it to people because things are just getting so crazy that like even people who aren't interested in this stuff like have to question it.
Yeah, without a doubt, I think that's a huge element to it. And I've had so many more people, um, kind of around me that I wouldn't think were interested and or even thinking about things in that context, and now they very much are.
Mm.
And I think it's also kind of human nature. When things are going okay, it's just like like let's say you need to fix something in the back. You got to fix something on your deck or whatever because it's like wiggly or something like that, and you just keep putting it off because it's fine. You use it, it's no problem or
Mm.
whatever, and you keep putting it off and you keep putting it off, and then there's like a hurricane tomorrow.
Mm.
It's like, oh crap! Here's this whole list of stuff that I really have been needing to get done that I'm now in a really bad position because there's a freaking hurricane coming tomorrow. And you go ham for like 14 hours and you fix all of those things that you've been needing to fix.
Mm.
And that's what it is. I feel like we've been for 2 decades really. We've just kind of been in that situation of like, we should fix these things, but God, I wish it was already done. I wish we could already just get past this. We'll do it tomorrow. Like, and now people are kind of waking up and the pressure is there and they're seeing that there is a fire and it's spreading and they're like, holy crap, this is not where I thought we were going to be. Now I need to make a decision. I need to look at the world with new eyes and look at my situation. Where are we really? Because we've just kind of been drunk this whole time, ignoring all of our problems.
Yeah, it's easy to ignore them when times are good. It's
Yeah.
easy to just you know, when, like we say, when property prices are going up and the stock market's going up, and you know your wage is going up, or the the numbers that you get on your pay slip are getting up, but maybe not your purchasing power. But you know, people don't think about it that way. It's easy just to just carry on and not think about these things, because why should they?
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy to ignore it. Just
Mm.
push it in the background until somebody prints $6 trillion and they're like, wait a second. What the hell?
They're like, a trillion? Is that bigger than a billion? Like, yeah, yeah. The amounts of money. Like, I can't wrap my head around
Little
them. Like, I
bit.
just sorry,
I said just a little bit.
just a little bit. It is so hard to even start to wrap your head around like how much money that is and like what that really means, because it's just not the sort of thing that we deal with in our day to day life. Like to even think about numbers that big, it's hard to really wrap your head around.
Yeah, it really is. And it certainly opens your eyes when you start asking those questions and start looking at it.
Mm.
That's why I'm so excited that like Swan and Cash App have done, and there's like a couple others now. Bull Bitcoin, I think is doing it. Like there's this push for DCA.
My sponsor is DCA as well.
Oh,
CoinFloor, I'll just give them a shout
CoinFloor
out for
has
the
DCA
UK.
now.
CoinFloor. Yeah, CoinFloor's
Oh,
DCA,
awesome.
and they'll do it from your bank. So you just set it up from your side. So like if you ever want to just close it down, it's easy. There is a push rather than a pull.
Oh, nice, dude. That's great.
It's awesome. Like I was really excited to have them on board, because I agree with you. Like DCA is just it's the best way. It's so good.
Yeah, dude. It's just so nice, and with like any capital that comes in because of the podcast, I've just been using Swan. Since Swan Bitcoin landed, I was just like,
Yeah.
boom, I was there immediately. Um, and I was so jacked because I actually had this. They did this a long time ago. Um, with there was a cool app called Lawnmower.
Hmm.
And it would round up all of your payments to the next dollar. And then every time you had $5, it would just buy you $5 worth of Bitcoin. And for like 3 months, I was ecstatic because it's the easiest way to save ever. Like I don't have to think about it. And like for as long as I like kind of got lost down the, oh, I'm gonna trade and make more Bitcoin, and then got punched a couple of times instead, uh that it was just so nice to finally have. I mean, that's one of the most exciting, for being such a mundane thing of just being able to invest and not think about it. It's
Yeah.
incredibly comforting to have that back.
So what happened with Swan? Like, did they adopt you? Did you adopt them? You now share a family name. How did that happen?
It was actually a running joke early on. We had nothing to do with each other. I knew a couple of the guys on the team,
Yeah.
um, and apparently most of the people over there were listeners of Bitcoin Audible, and
Yeah.
and then as soon as they dropped Brady from, I spoke with Brady and Cory at some point, but me and Brady, really good friends. We hung out at Bitcoin 2019. I actually stayed with him, um, and he does their I think he's like marketing or something over there. I don't know. He's the one doing all the
Yeah.
work.
I'm
And
gonna tell. I've got Cory on in the next couple of weeks, so I'm gonna tell him that. I'm gonna say you said that.
don't don't tell him I say Cory wasn't doing any work. It's like, no, they're sharing it. They're sharing it. Okay. But yeah, they just reached out to me randomly because we had this kind of ongoing joke that I was suing them over using the Swann name.
I
Um,
like it.
and then just randomly out of the blue, they sponsored the show for a little while, and that was great. And I've been loving working with the team, but more than anything, I just wanted to have a Bitcoin savings thing. And I
Yeah.
love that as soon as they landed, Cash App did it, Bull Bitcoin did it. I
Mhm.
think there were like four. I can't remember. Which other ones. I'd been writing them down at some point,
Mm.
but it was like DCA was a thing, and I'm like, we are going to
It's the
be the
best.
hodl floor, baby.
It's the best, and having that, it's nice to have sponsorship from them. But then, like with Swan Bitcoin and with CoinFloor here, you can just say to people, if if someone's saying to you, okay, fine, all right, I give in. Where can I buy Bitcoin? You can say with confidence, go to one of these two companies. You
Yeah,
know that all they can do is buy Bitcoin. All they
yeah,
can do is DCA. It's so hard for them to fuck up. That's the beautiful thing, is like you send them to like Coinbase or one of these places, and like they're going to come back and tell you, oh my god, yeah, I bought the new thing, it's XRP, it's amazing, or like some other bullshit, and you're just like, oh fuck, like how have you messed this up? Whereas this, they cannot mess it up.
yeah,
It's so good.
yeah, yeah. Like I said, they supported the show for a while, but I don't even like I like no disclaimer, like they don't support the show or they don't actually sponsor the show anymore. I just shield them because I genuinely think it's the best place to send people to get Bitcoin for exactly that reason. They're just going
Yeah.
to go and get Bitcoin. They're not going to get told to buy Aragon and Cardano and
Oh.
double your money. You can stake these coins. Like,
Link.
they're not going to be, oh God, don't even get me started. Um, but they're
It's all over
basically
my
not going to get
profile all the
robbed.
time. Yeah.
So yeah, Bitcoin only, baby. That's the way I go.
Yeah.
Super just simplifies the crap out of everything.
Yeah, and from what I understand, Swan has got some of the best rates as well. Like I've listened to a couple of episodes and dug in a little bit. Like it just seems that they've looked at the space and gone like, what makes sense? A little bit like with Bitcoin, is like Satoshi going like, what is the most obvious, best thing that I can do here? And they've done that, and like it just works.
Yeah, yeah. So I do a 0.9% fee if you or 0.99 whatever 1% fee.
Mm,
If you like prepay or whatever, but that's pretty significant because the couple times that I'll sell with Cash App, if I'm like moving stuff in and out, like something that I got in as donations and I'm like paying somebody, I'll usually still have to do it in dollars. Um,
mm,
and so like if I cash out with with Cash App, um, like depending on the amount, like it can actually be like a 3% fee. But I think 2% is pretty regular. I think it's like anything over like 50 or $100 is 2%.
mm.
But yeah, Swan does a good job. I don't know. I hope they're doing great, and I hope they stay in business forever because they do have some pretty low fees. You can't get that on DCA with anybody else, as far as I've
Mm.
searched so far.
No, it's really really good. It is really good. Yeah, it's and that's the kind of businesses that make me more bullish. Like when I see that some seriously smart people are starting some businesses and doing things right because they clearly understand how important this technology is going to be and that it's the future, and they understand that long-term reputation is much more important than just making a quick buck. That makes me very very confident.
Yeah, yeah. The fact that they would explicitly turn down business because they know it's not a smart long-term solution and that they want like trusted customers. There are a handful of businesses that really in the last year have come up in the Bitcoin space and like really kind of showed their hand of like, we're here for Bitcoin. We're here for the long haul. Like
Mm,
we're very, very serious and dedicated to this. And I think those reputations are going to feed back on them. Like I think that is going to be their uh, I think that's going to be really their calling card in the future because one of the big things about Bitcoin is that a trustless money and uh, is actually something that's really good at rebuilding. It's a great foundation for trusted business relationships and a trusted economy. Like, because we have trustless money, we can actually build sustainable relationships and um, not worry about getting cheated on the back end somewhere. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like, and we also know that, when we hand over Bitcoin to somebody else, there's no going back. Like, I have to be okay with this person. I think reputations and like integrity is actually reinforced as important in the ecosystem, in the economy, to a much, much stronger degree than one that's based on authority. Because if
Mm.
you just think you'll go with a, FDIC insurance is a good example. You'll just go put your
Yeah.
money in a bank because you're like, well, the government's going to pay me. Like, imagine getting free insurance. Like, imagine like somebody who could come in, like you just had liability insurance for your car because the government guaranteed it for the other person, and you just didn't have
Mm.
to buy, and you didn't have to care about being responsible, or making sure you didn't bump into somebody or something. Oh, the government will pay for it
Mm.
if anything ever goes wrong. Like, it's a horrible moral hazard. And sound money really creates it realigns that relationship, that you actually want to trust a good relationship with businesses that you work with, as opposed to just kind of like not caring.
Mm. Yeah, I completely agree, and I've just from my little bit of time on Bitcoin Twitter and like chatting to other Bitcoiners, what's weird is I've built so much more trust with those people. A lot of them are anonymous and or pseudonymous, and we haven't met in real life, a lot of them, but the trust that you build through these people when you see that consistently they do what they say they're going to do,
Hmm.
and they don't fuck around, which is basically what I'm used to with every other business I've been involved in. It's just loads of just people weaseling around, trying to fuck each other over, constantly lying. That there's no integrity. Like it's really frustrating, and it's a completely different world, which is so nice. Like whenever I'm collaborating with other people or doing anything in this space, like everyone's so helpful and everyone sticks to their word, because if they don't, they get serious shit for it. Like
Yeah.
you get serious shit if you mess around and don't keep your word.
Yeah. Yeah. I truly think that that's actually at the heart of, um I think it's part of consequence of the responsibility that you feel in Bitcoin. Like, when
Mm.
you're like, everybody is here for such a meaningful reason, you know? Like, it's not most of the people, like most of the Bitcoiners, I mean, there are speculators through and through all over the place. But that's a big reason why I get sick of crypto, and why the bull markets, fun as they are price wise, they kind of suck when it comes to signal to noise wise. You get a whole bunch of
Yeah.
dumbtards who are just running in and think they know everything, and
Yeah.
they couldn't care less about Bitcoin. Like, right now, in the heart of the bear market is when everyone you talk to is there because they get it,
Yeah.
because they know why we're here. You hold a 70% loss and you build in a bear market when you know what you're doing, like, or
Mm.
when you really care about it. Um,
Yeah.
and it's great to be able to build those relationships and actually meet people. People I've never met, I consider like some of my best friends, like
Yeah.
really close people that I've maybe had a Zoom meeting with or whatever, and over again, like you and I, like this is the first time we've
Mm.
chatted, which is pretty long overdue, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
and but like we can, I don't know, we could just, it's like we're on the same page, and I find that constantly with people in this space. Yeah, it's awesome.
It's shared values,
Yeah.
and just that goes a long way. Whereas it's quite rare to find that in sort of, I call it normal life, but it's not so normal. It's rare. It's rare to find that. And I was going to ask you actually, because you said earlier you're quite like techie, and you've always been involved in this kind of stuff. Like
Hmm.
I'm trying to put together a kind of, I don't know whether it will be like once a month or like some sort of group where we can jump on a live chat or something and have a shared project. I like, so my thing is I really want to put BTCpay server on my website.
Yeah.
That's my next. So like my last thing was start to run a node, and before that was to get graphene on this phone. And but
Mhm.
I'm doing it all alone, and I'm not the most techie person. Like I'll battle through, but I'm trying to get everyone I speak to now just to like put a list of things that they're interested in or might want to build or learn about, and then like it'd be quite cool to get some like-minded Bitcoiners on and just you know build some stuff and help each other out if that maybe is something you're interested in.
No, that sounds awesome, actually. And I would love to go back through the BTC Pay server process from scratch because I had a lot of hiccups
Mm,
early on, and I don't remember. It's like one of those things that like you remember you struggled, but you don't really remember exactly what it was. Like I wouldn't be able
yeah.
to write a tutorial on it, you know?
Mm.
um,
Yeah, yeah.
and so it would be good to kind of like ingrain that and like go through that process because I love the the interface itself is a little bit is pretty unintuitive in a lot of different ways, but after you kind of get the feel of it, and I'm hoping, and I've still been I've delayed it, but I would like to do like a write up of like how I would expect the user interface to work. Um,
Yeah.
but after you get the feel of it, it's so like you can do so much with it.
Mm,
I've loved having it. It's been wonderful to have on my site. And I will say one thing. I tried it a couple of different ways at the beginning. Just do Luna Node. If you're doing like a
okay.
cloud server or whatever, just go to Luna Node. You literally like you click like a couple of different options and then it just goes, and it's also not very expensive. So as far as like getting like a cloud instance up, it's cheaper than pretty much anything else I was doing. It's cheaper than DigitalOcean, which is what I do for my website.
Okay, I'll check that out. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's something I'm quite excited about doing because I want to start accepting Bitcoin, and I want to be technically competent enough that if someone, a friend of mine, says to me, "Well, okay, I'll accept Bitcoin," then I can say, "Okay, well, I can help you with that." Being
Hmm.
able to actually get people onboarded, because it's all well and good saying how great this stuff is, but it'd be nice to get more people using it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll tell you what's fun is I use Fold like religiously.
Mm.
And I'm usually using my credit card because I just want to stack Bitcoin. Um, but I use Lightning through Strike when I have money in that account. But I actually had to create an entirely new bank account just to integrate with Strike because my
Right.
bank sucks. Um, but when I am using Lightning on just kind of randomly or whatever, which is still pretty frequent. Um, every time if my Breeze wallet or whatever ever doesn't have enough balance or something like that,
Mm.
I constantly use my BTC Pay um, to refill that.
Mm.
But I have Zap wallet on my phone, and I will literally just in the checkout line or like in the drive-through, like getting Starbucks, I can just whip that thing out, and it's like it's so fast. Like
Mm.
just boom, boom, boom. I've got the card, copy paste, put in my Starbucks thing, and I'm paying. And I do
That's the
that
future.
regularly now, and I love it. Like
Mm.
it's been more and more fluid. I love Zap and I love Breeze. They're both awesome wallets, and BTC Pay is kind of like my hub.
Mm.
And then I refill my Breeze wallet. Breeze wallet's like my kind of like hot wallet. I still don't have like a huge channel with it right now. I've been planning on opening another one, but right now I've just been using the defaults on everything because it's simpler. Um,
Yeah, it takes time to play with this stuff.
yeah, yeah.
it all takes time. Like I've got my node all set up and everything, but I haven't really messed
Ooh,
around with
nice.
Lightning that much, or really like got my hands dirty with it because it's just it's a time thing. But I'm excited to get my hands dirty. That's kind of what the last kind of month and going forward now is just me trying to learn this stuff and then trying to help other people with my journey and problems and sort of maybe make a couple of videos and stuff because it's really confusing, but once you actually accomplish it and like you're using it, like you said, it's amazing. It just feels so good.
Definitely. It's its own rabbit hole.
All right,
um,
Guy. Well, listen, I've kept you for an hour and a half now. It's been really good catching up with you, and like you said,
dude,
we should have
absolutely.
done it sooner. And I've I really hope that we can do a project together in the future. And if you fancy that BTC stuff, that'd be great.
Dude, definitely. Hit me up and give me whatever link, anything like
Yeah,
whether you're making a group or whatever. Just shoot it to me in
yeah,
DM on Twitter. I'd
I
love to
will
check
do
it out. Yeah.
for sure. And yeah, before we close it out, is there anything that you wanted to cover that we haven't?
Um. No, I think we got it all. Like
Yeah.
this is a good episode. It's a good chat. I appreciate it.
Awesome. And also before we go, just shout out where people can find you. Like I said at the beginning, and I really mean this, it is brilliant. I love Bitcoin Audible. I love what you're doing, and I'm definitely not going to be the only person who is going to find value in this. It's brilliant. So anyone who wants to check out these articles, but either is an idiot like me and can't read properly, or just doesn't have the time, then where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Bitcoin Audible or at the Crypto Economy. That's my other tag. I'm sure you can just search Guy Swann, and that's Swan with two N's. Um, and yeah, I got 530 odd episodes, 420 reads, and it's a huge database. I find myself now going back and listening to my own stuff just because I'm like, oh my god, I forgot about this piece. I've read so much stuff now. It's like that scroll just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and oh, and if anybody wants to do the Swan Bitcoin thing, DCA is the way to go. So it's Cash App, Coin Floor, Swan Bitcoin, but I do have an affiliate link, swanbitcoin.com/guy. If you listen to the show, that's the one I show all the time.
And
Um,
that's just for US, isn't it?
that is just for US,
Yeah.
yeah. Nobody over in the UK yet, but I keep hearing rumblings.
Yeah,
I
I've
know they're
heard them
pushing
too.
for it. So, but yeah, check out Bitcoin Audible, man.
All right. Thanks, Guy. And then, like I say, I hope we speak soon.
Yeah, man, dude. Thanks so much, dude. I'll talk to you later.
Cheers.